When I was 15, my parents kicked me out so they could give my room to my pregnant twin sister. Now, 6 years later, they're trying to move into my house, and what I found out about them at the Bell County Justice Center completely knocked the wind out of me. Getting kicked out at 15 was brutal on its own. But the real twist? They actually want to live with me now. I'd always felt this quiet, aching sense that I didn't belong. Not in the oops, we weren't planning another baby kind of way. No, I mean in the raw, soul-cutting way where someone tells you they never wanted you. And not just anyone. My parents. They looked me in the eyes and told me they only ever wanted one child, my twin sister, Emily. They said they wished it had just been her. Do you know what that does to a kid? To be spoken to like you're a mistake that ruined the picture-perfect family? Like you're some glitch in an otherwise flawless plan? It was like growing up in a house where I was constantly reminded I was the extra piece that didn't fit, some background noise they were forced to tolerate. Emily, she was the golden child. The sun rose and set with her. Everything my parents ever dreamed of was wrapped in that girl. Blonde curls, dimples, perfect grades, ballet recitals, gymnastics trophies. Her room? It looked like it came out of a magazine, pink curtains, a Disney princess bedspread, rows and rows of dolls and trophies neatly arranged like a shrine. And me? I had a corner. A cold, creaky bed with a hand-me-down dresser that smelled like mothballs and regret. Every day I woke up reminded that I didn't matter, that I wasn't wanted. My parents' voices would echo down the hall, excited about Emily's new leotard or the big recital coming up. Meanwhile, I was left behind, making cereal in silence and trying to figure out what to do with the hours of my day. No rides, no attention, no warmth. The only time they noticed me was when I was in the way. And if they did speak to me, it was always the same tired refrain. Why can't you be more like your sister? I heard it so often it may as well have been my name. School wasn't much better. Parent-teacher night still plays in my mind like a broken record. My parents beamed at Emily's finger paint masterpieces like she was the next Picasso. Then my teacher handed them my report card, straight A's, and they didn't even look. Just stuffed it into a purse and moved on. That night I had walked home clutching the hope that maybe they'd finally see me. Spoiler alert, they didn't. Emily got the new outfits, the birthday parties, the attention at dinner. I got mystery hand-me-downs from cousins I didn't even know. Shirts with stretched collars and stains that wouldn't come out. Her closet changed with the seasons. Mine stayed the same. Christmas morning? She had a mountain of gifts. I had two, enough for them to say they didn't forget me. I'd sit there pretending to smile while inside, something wilted. I felt like the leftover kid. And just when I thought I couldn't feel more invisible, my grandfather Henry, the only person who truly cared about me, got sick. Cancer. I thought maybe, this would bring the family closer. Instead, it pulled us further apart. My parents took Emily to visit him regularly, giving her fresh flowers and letting her play nurse. Me? They told me to stay home. Said they needed help around the house. What a joke. So I started sneaking out to see him on my own. I'd bike across town, sometimes before school, sometimes after, and I'd sit with him in the fading light of his hospital room. He'd always smile when he saw me. Told me I was strong. That I had heart. That I was the only one in the family who really listened. But even then, I could see it in his eyes. He knew. He knew how they treated me. When he died, it felt like the last good thing in my world had been taken. My parents didn't ask if I was okay. Their focus? Emily, of course. Making sure she was coping. She stood at the front during the funeral beside them, a picture of mourning. I stood in the back, alone, like someone wanted guest. I've never felt smaller. After he passed, the little bits of attention I used to get vanished completely. I became a ghost in that two-story house on Maple Drive. Dinner? Just laughter and stories directed at Emily. I might as well have been a chair. In family photos, I was a blur in the background, if I made it in at all. Sometimes it was just a sliver of my arm or the top of my head. If a stranger flipped through our albums, they'd swear Emily was an only child. I tried to speak up. Once, when Emily got another brand new dress, I asked why I never got anything. My mom waved me off with, "Emily has events. You're fine with what you've got." If I dared question it further, I was selfish, ungrateful, a problem. Eventually, I just gave up, faded into the background. I became really good at disappearing, at pretending it didn't hurt. But it always did. My dad had this look he gave me, like I was a broken appliance that needed fixing. His words still echo in my head. "You need to get your act together, Logan. Why can't you be more like your sister?" And Emily? She played her role perfectly. Big eyes, crocodile tears, Sweet little lies. She knew how to pull every string, and our parents danced like puppets. I spent years wondering what was wrong with me, why I wasn't lovable, why I wasn't the kind of son anyone would want. I'd lie awake at night, staring at the cracks in the ceiling, thinking maybe things would be easier if I just vanished. That maybe then, finally, they'd be happy. Looking back now, I can see how toxic it all was. But when you're 15 and desperate for love, you don't see the poison. You just think it's you. I tried everything. Being quiet, being helpful, being invisible, but nothing worked. They never saw me. By the time I turned 15, I had already started counting down the days until I could get out. I clung to the idea that at 18, I'd be free. But nothing could have prepared me for what came next. Emily got pregnant. At 15, I was dreaming of escape. At 15, she was playing house. The father? A 20-year-old guy who'd barely graduated and was bouncing between pizza delivery and shifts at the car wash. Not exactly the definition of responsible. And then came the bombshell. They needed my room. So they kicked me out. When my parents found out Emily was pregnant, I braced myself for the explosion. For once, I thought maybe they'd draw a line, set boundaries, finally act like parents. But nope. They acted like she just won a damn Olympic medal. They were thrilled. Our little girl's growing up, my mom gushed. We're going to be grandparents. My dad even opened a bottle of cheap champagne to celebrate. I stood there, completely stunned, wondering if I was stuck in some warped alternate reality. Their daughter was 15, pregnant by a 20-year-old with a part-time job at the car wash and a side hustle delivering pizzas, and they were treating it like a fairy tale. They threw together a shotgun wedding faster than you could blink. I swear, it felt like a speed round on a game show. One moment I was hiding out in my cramped little corner of that 2-story house on Maple Drive, and the next I was being told to get dressed. We're going to the courthouse. No one asked me how I felt about any of it. Not that it would have mattered. My opinion never did. Then came the real blow. About a month after the wedding, my mom called me downstairs. She had that familiar look, a forced smile stretched too tight, the one she always wore before dropping some emotional grenade on me. She started talking sweetly, fake soft, about how Emily and the baby would need more space. I remember standing there, frozen, thinking, why is she telling me this? Then she hit me with it. We'll need your room for the baby, she said. Just like that. Like she was asking me to move my shoes, not give up the only piece of the world that was mine. I just stared at her. My room, small, outdated, barely mine to begin with, was being taken away. That was the moment something inside me broke. I asked, where am I supposed to go? She shrugged. You're old enough to figure it out, she said. And just to twist the knife, she added, you should be grateful we let you stay this long. I was 15. They knew I had nowhere else to go. No backup plan. No money. No family left, not after Grandpa Henry passed. And still, they didn't care. A nursery for the grandchild meant more than keeping their own son under a roof. And my dad? He stood there with his arms crossed like some statue, just echoing whatever my mom said. You're a young man now. Time to take some responsibility. Like it was normal, expected, to kick your teenage son out because your daughter decided to play house. So that night, I packed my things. A few worn-out clothes, a couple paperbacks, and the small keepsakes Grandpa Henry had given me before he passed, little reminders that someone had loved me once. That room had never been much, but it was the only place I had that felt even remotely mine. And now it was being repainted pale yellow for a baby that hadn't even been born yet, while I was being tossed out like old trash. I asked them one last time, where am I supposed to go? Dad just gave me that same dead-eyed stare and said, you'll figure it out. Like I was going off to college. Like this was a choice. And Mom? She smiled. That syrupy, fake smile she used like a mask. We're doing this for your sister. She needs us right now. What about me? I wanted to scream. When did I ever matter to you? But I already knew the answer. So I did the only thing I could. I went out to the old shed behind the house and grabbed an old camping tent. Set it up near the edge of the yard, next to the rotting fence. That tent became my home. It was pathetic, I know. But it was the best I had. The ground was hard. The nights were bitter. But at least I was still close enough to hear them laugh over dinner, talk about crib colors and stroller brands, while I shivered under layers of clothes trying not to cry. I felt like a stray dog they kept in the yard, close enough to feel guilty, but far enough to ignore. And then winter came. Early and hard. I layered every piece of clothing I owned, but it didn't matter. The cold crept in anyway. I did my homework by flashlight, curled up in that tent, teeth chattering while trying to solve algebra equations. I was still trying to stay in school, trying to hold on to something that felt normal. But my grades tanked. Who can study when you're half frozen? And my parents? They didn't say a word. They were too busy repainting my old room and ordering baby furniture for Emily's future son. To them, I had already disappeared. Sometimes I'd sneak to the kitchen window, just to see them, just to remember what it was like to be part of a family. From the outside, they looked like something off a holiday card, laughing, smiling, perfect. No one would ever guess their son was sleeping in a tent 10 feet away, trying not to freeze to death. I started doing odd jobs, anything that could earn a few bucks. Mowing lawns, shoveling driveways, running groceries for neighbors. Most people didn't want to deal with me. I guess a teenage boy with sunken eyes and frostbitten fingers isn't the most welcoming sight. But a few gave me a chance. And every dollar counted. Some nights I'd come back with a sandwich or a warm drink, pretending this was just a phase, like I was doing this on purpose, like it was an adventure. But I wasn't fooling anyone, least of all myself. If Grandpa Henry were still alive, I wouldn't have been out there. I know that in my bones. He would have taken me in without a second thought. But he was gone, and I had no one. I thought about crashing with a friend, but this town's small. I knew how it worked. My parents had already done the rounds, spreading their version of the story, that I'd left by choice, that I couldn't follow rules. Their perfect family image was more important than the truth. So I stayed in that tent. And one night, while the wind howled through the trees like it wanted to tear the world apart, I realized I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't keep waiting, hoping they'd come out and say they were sorry. They never would. I was just extra baggage, a mistake they never figured out how to return. So I made a decision. No more chasing their love. No more waiting for the crumbs of their affection. If they didn't want me in their lives, fine. I'd go build my own. Somehow. I didn't have a plan. I didn't have money. But I had a spark. A tiny one. And that night, in the freezing dark, I made myself a promise. I was going to move forward, even if I had to crawl. Living in that tent nearly broke me. The winter was relentless, and the nights felt like they'd never end. I'd lie there with numb fingers and an empty stomach, wondering if this surviving, not living, was all my life would ever be. I'd scraped together some money from odd jobs, mowing lawns, shoveling snow, delivering groceries, but it wasn't enough to get off the street. Still, I held on to that cash like it was gold, tucked in a worn envelope at the bottom of my backpack. I'd fall asleep to the sound of wind battering the tent walls, whispering to myself, "You're not staying here forever." One cold afternoon after school, I was still hanging on, barely. I found myself outside Early Rise Cafe, a bakery I used to pass every day. The smell of fresh bread and cinnamon always stopped me in my tracks. That day, I was starving. I hadn't eaten anything warm in over 24 hours, and I guess I looked as desperate as I felt, just standing there staring through the glass like a kid out of an old movie. That's when Walter came out. He was the owner, older guy, rough voice, a face carved by time and hard years. He had this no-nonsense presence, the kind that tells you he's seen some dark days and clawed his way through them. "You need something?" he asked, looking me over. I tried to shrug it off, play it cool. But he wasn't buying it. Walter could read people, probably had to, running a place like that. "You looking for work, kid?" he said. I didn't even pause. Just nodded. This was my shot, and I wasn't about to let it pass. He told me he needed someone to sweep the floors, clean trays, help with deliveries, nothing fancy. Paid cash. Plus, I could take home whatever bread didn't sell. It felt like I'd won the lottery. The job was tough. The cafe opened early, like before sunrise early. I had to drag myself out of the tent at 5:30 a.m., hauling myself through cold streets in worn shoes just to make it on time. But when I stepped inside that little warm cafe, the smell of dough and the hum of ovens felt like heaven. Walter gave me a quick walkthrough, laid down the rules, sharp and simple. No slacking, no stealing, no drama. I didn't mind. I just needed a place to be, somewhere I mattered. The work was hard. Heavy flour bags, scrubbing until my hands hurt, on my feet for hours. But I didn't care. For once, I had a reason to wake up in the morning. Walter wasn't the warm and fuzzy type. But after a while, he started talking more. He told me how he'd been thrown out by his dad when he was 17. Said he was told he'd never amount to anything. Sounded familiar. "I built this place from nothing," he said one night while wiping down the counter. "Took years. But it's mine." I think he saw a version of himself in me. And slowly, something changed. He started teaching me things, how to stretch a dollar, how to budget, even how to make simple pastries. He never said much, but he noticed. He gave a damn. A few weeks in, he sat me down after closing. I braced for bad news, figured I screwed something up. But instead, he said, "There's a little room upstairs. Used to be storage. It's nothing fancy, but if you want it, it's yours." It was small, just a narrow bed, a creaky window, and a single lamp. But it was warm, dry, safe. I moved in that night with everything I owned in one backpack. I slept deeper than I had in months. Waking up in that little room above Early Rise Cafe, knowing I had a job, a roof, and someone who actually trusted me, it changed everything. I threw myself into the work. Showed up early, stayed late, scrubbed every inch of that place like it was my own. I wanted to earn it. Walter showed me how to knead dough until it felt alive under your hands. How to glaze an apple tart just right. He taught me to hustle, to shut up and show up. He didn't hand out praise often, but when he gave me one of his signature nods or a quiet, "Not bad," it meant more than 1,000 empty, "I love yous" from my parents ever could. Then one day after my shift, he handed me an envelope. "You've been doing good work, kid," he said, gruff as ever. "Here's your first real paycheck." I opened it right there in the kitchen. My hands shook. It wasn't much, but it was more than I'd ever held at once. For the first time, I felt like maybe I was finally building something. Something real. The cafe became my anchor. Most mornings I was up before the sky turned gray. I'd work the early shift, then head to the local learning center in the afternoons to use the Wi-Fi and try to catch up on school stuff. I kept applying for more jobs. I knew the bakery wasn't forever. But for now, it was exactly what I needed. I treated every dollar like it was sacred. Lived like I was still in that tent, never spending on anything but the basics. Walter let me take home leftover bread, and I stretched it for days. Bought canned soup from the discount aisle and rationed it like I was on a lifeboat. Walter never asked about my past, but I could tell he knew. He never pushed, just watched, quietly. And one night, after we locked up, he handed me a small set of keys. "In case you ever need to close up," he said. Like it was nothing. But to me, it was everything. That little clink of metal in my palm. That was trust. More than I ever got from my own parents. In his gruff, wordless way, Walter had my back. And that meant more than he'd ever know. That cafe became my rhythm. My calm in the storm. But even then, some days were harder than others. I'd see families come in. Parents and kids laughing, picking cookies, arguing over sprinkles. And it hurt. Every time. Right in the gut. Some days, I had to slip into the back room just to breathe. To remind myself that I wasn't nothing. That just because they threw me out didn't mean I didn't matter. Walter had a saying, short and sharp, just like him. You either let life knock you down, or you get up and knock it back. I lived by that. Repeated it like a prayer. And every night, as I crawled into bed in that little room above the bakery, I whispered to myself, "Keep going. You're getting there." Then one morning, I noticed Walter looked tired. More than usual. I asked if he was okay, and he just grunted, "Getting old." But the look he gave me, it stayed with me. Like he was trying to say, "Don't settle here forever. There's more out there for you." At the time, I brushed off the look Walter gave me, figured he was just tired, maybe having one of those long, worn-out days. But it lingered in my mind, like a voice I couldn't quite shut off. He was right. As much as I appreciated everything the Early Rise Cafe had done for me, I couldn't stay there forever. I had to start thinking beyond just getting by. So I began branching out. Picked up extra shifts at a nearby corner store, and on weekends, I took landscaping jobs or helped unload trucks at the auto parts depot, anything that put a few extra dollars in my pocket. It wasn't easy. I was working every hour I could get, often running on fumes. Some nights I only caught a couple hours of sleep before I was back on my feet again. But weirdly enough, I didn't feel drained. I felt driven. I was finally steering the wheel of my own life. I wasn't just reacting. I was building. Looking back now, I know how lucky I was to meet Walter. That job at the cafe wasn't just a paycheck. It was a turning point. My first real break. My first taste of stability. For once, I had a future that wasn't defined by someone else's choices. I was laying the foundation for something mine. I wasn't the forgotten kid in a tent anymore. I was a man putting down roots, one long shift, one scraped dollar at a time. And for a while, that was enough. After a few relentless years of saving every cent and working myself to the bone, I finally did it. I bought my own house. It wasn't flashy or big. Just a modest little two-bedroom with a finished attic on the edge of Riverdale. But it was mine. No landlords. No judgment. No one standing over me, ready to rip it away. When I turned the key and walked through that front door for the first time, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Pride. The place was bare at first. I slept on an air mattress in the attic. Used moving boxes for tables. Ate canned soup by flashlight when the power hadn't been turned on yet. But I didn't care. Every morning I woke up knowing this space was mine. My own little corner of the world, and no one could take it away from me. I slowly began making it feel like home. Picked up a creaky second-hand couch. Found a wobbly dining table at a garage sale. It wasn't much, but every single item I brought in made me feel like I was finally settling. Finally breathing. Then, just as the silence of the house started to feel like peace instead of loneliness, the doorbell rang. I figured it was a delivery or maybe one of the neighbors welcoming me to the block. But when I opened the door, my entire body locked up. There they were. Jessica Miller, my mother. Walter, my father. Emily, my sister. Her husband. And their 2 kids. All standing on my porch like they belonged there. Like we were still some kind of tight-knit, wholesome family. My mom flashed that sugary, stretched-tight smile, the one she used when she was lying through her teeth. "Surprise," she said, too cheerfully. "We heard you bought a house. We're so proud of you, Logan." I stood there gripping the doorknob, heart pounding. Part of me wanted to slam the door. Another part was frozen in disbelief. Emily stepped forward, a toddler balanced on her hip, and casually peeked past me into the house like she was already moving in. "Nice place, bro," she said, all breezy. "You've really made something of yourself." And then it clicked. This wasn't a surprise visit. This was a takeover. They didn't come to reconnect. They came because they wanted something. It was always like this. They only ever showed up when they needed me. Walter cleared his throat, probably thinking he was about to deliver some inspiring fatherly wisdom. "Logan," he started, "with Emily's family growing and you having all this space to yourself, we figured it was time to let the past go. Families should stick together." I almost laughed. Family? These were the people who tossed me out at 15 and left me to freeze in a tent. I kept my voice steady. "What exactly are you asking for?" My mom stepped forward, that same over-rehearsed smile plastered on. "We thought, wouldn't it be wonderful if we all moved in here? One big happy family again. Just like old times." I stared at her, stunned. Like she hadn't just tried to erase the years of abandonment and cruelty with a sing-song suggestion. "No," I said. Calm. Firm. Her smile faltered. Like she didn't understand the word. "But, we're family," she said, confused. As if that one word erased everything they'd done. My hands were trembling. My heart thudded in my chest like a war drum. I took a breath. "Where was that family when I was 15? Freezing in a tent behind your house?" I asked. "Where was this stick together when I was starving and invisible?" Silence. The air went thick. My dad's face turned red, his signature pre-explosion look. He puffed up like he always did when he wanted to feel powerful. "Now listen here." "No," I interrupted. My voice didn't shake this time. "You listen. I built this home. Every inch. Every damn dollar. Without you. Without your help. Without your approval. This is mine. You don't get to walk in now and pretend none of it happened. You're not welcome here." Emily scoffed, rocking the baby on her hip. "You're being selfish. We need the space. You owe us." That was it. "Owe you," I said, voice rising. "I don't owe you anything. You kicked me out. Left me to survive on my own. And now you think you can waltz in and live in the house I built? Not a chance." My dad looked like he might blow a gasket, fist clenched, jaw locked. But he didn't say a word. He just stared at me like he was seeing me for the first time. Maybe he finally was. My mom tried one last time, voice soft, pleading, carefully measured. "We know we've made mistakes," she said, eyes damp with artificial regret. "But we're trying to make things right. We just want to be a family again." But I wasn't falling for it. "You only want to play family now that I've got something you need," I told them, standing firm in the doorway of my home. "But that's not how this works. I've moved on. And you should too." For a second, they all just stood there blinking like I was speaking another language. Like they genuinely couldn't believe I was saying no to them. Me. The quiet one. The one who used to stay silent and small and agreeable. Eventually, without another word, they turned around and shuffled back to their car. My mom's smile dropped. Emily looked stunned. My dad didn't even glance back. They climbed in, shut the doors, and drove off like they were the victims in some sad little family tragedy. I stood in the doorway watching their taillights disappear, emotions swirling in my chest like a storm I'd been holding back for years, anger, sadness, and something I didn't expect. Peace. For so long, I'd waited for that moment, dreamed of it. That someday, they'd show up and admit what they'd done, beg for forgiveness, try to fix it. But now that they had come back, I realized the truth. I didn't need them anymore. And more than that, I didn't want them. I closed the door and leaned back against it, letting out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. My hands were still trembling, my pulse still high, but underneath all of that adrenaline was something solid. Something new. Freedom. For years, I let their rejection define me. Let it shape how I saw myself, broken, expendable, invisible. But standing there in that quiet little house in Riverdale, I didn't feel small anymore. I felt like I had taken back my story. I knew this probably wasn't the end. People like them don't just slink away after hearing no. Toxic people always circle back, looking for cracks they can crawl through. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of that. I had a spine now. A voice. A life. That night, I sat on my second-hand couch in the still empty living room and just breathed. Deep, grounding, real breaths. The space around me didn't feel cold or echoey anymore. It felt earned. It felt like mine. No more chasing their love. No more guilt for surviving. This life? I built it for me. A couple of weeks passed. Quiet. Peaceful. I thought maybe, just maybe, that front porch ambush had been the end of it. But I was wrong. Because toxic people, especially ones who've built their identity around controlling others, don't just walk away. When one door closes, they go hunting for a window. It started with a letter. I came home from a long shift, tired but steady, and there it was, a crisp, official-looking envelope waiting in my mailbox like a trap. I felt it before I even opened it, that low, sick weight in the pit of my stomach. I tore it open. A legal notice. Emily was contesting the ownership of my house. She claimed it was family property, and that she had a right to a portion of it. Her name wasn't on anything. She hadn't paid a cent. But here she was, coming for the one thing I had built from scratch. I stood there in the driveway, staring at the paperwork, stunned. They really couldn't let me have one thing. The next morning, I called a lawyer. I wasn't about to let them steamroll me. Her name was Jessica Miller, from Miller & Company, a tight-knit legal firm in the city center. And yeah, the irony of her name stung a little. But Jessica? She was sharp as hell. Calm, razor-focused, and exactly the kind of person I needed in my corner. She flipped through the documents with a raised eyebrow. They don't have a leg to stand on, she said. But they'll make it a headache. She wasn't wrong. Over the next few weeks, my family turned the legal system into a circus. Accused me of using their money to buy the house. Claimed I had manipulated them, that I owed them everything. That I'd turned my back on the people who raised me. Every word was a lie. They knew it. I knew it. But that didn't stop them from twisting the story and feeding it to anyone who'd listen. The gossip spread like wildfire. People I hadn't heard from in years started reaching out. Old family friends. Distant cousins. Even a nosy neighbor from Maple Drive. Why are you doing this to your family? They asked. Why can't you just let them in? No one asked what had actually happened. No one asked about the tent. The cold. The silence. They only saw what my parents told them, a one-sided tale about an ungrateful son who shut the door on his poor, loving family. It felt like I was 15 again, blamed, unheard, erased. But I wasn't that kid anymore. I wasn't going to let them write my story. I got to work. Collected everything. Pay stubs. Bank statements. Old receipts from when I was sleeping in that tent and stretching day-old bread into dinner. Documents proving I worked multiple jobs to afford the down payment. That I paid every cent on my own. Then I asked Jessica to dig deeper. I needed to know what gave them the audacity to claim something they'd abandoned me to earn. A few weeks later, Jessica called and asked me to come in. I assumed it was a simple update, maybe another legal motion or court date. But when I stepped into her office, she had this look on her face like she'd uncovered something serious. She slid a thick folder across the desk. "You need to see this," she said quietly. The second I opened the folder, I knew it wasn't going to be good. Turns out, my parents had been hiding something massive. You remember Henry, my grandfather? The only person who ever really saw me? Before he passed, he left behind an inheritance. A significant one. It was meant to go directly to me when I turned 21. But I never saw a cent. My parents had found a loophole. Some legal maneuvering, something buried in fine print. With just enough technicality and just enough audacity, they gained early access to the trust. And they didn't just dip into it, they drained it. They used the money to pay off their mounting credit card debt, funded Emily's shotgun wedding, poured tens of thousands into her husband's pathetic attempt at running a landscaping business that crashed within a year. And if that wasn't enough, they used some of my inheritance to make a down payment on their new home. And they never told me a damn thing. I sat there in Jessica Miller's office with the folder spread open across the desk. Pages and pages of bank records, withdrawal receipts, checks with my grandfather's trust name scribbled in the memo line. My hands were shaking. I couldn't tell if it was fury or heartbreak. Probably both. They let me freeze in a backyard tent while they were spinning the last gift my grandfather ever left me. All those nights I lay awake wondering what was wrong with me, why I wasn't enough. Turns out, I was never a son to them. I was a silent account to be emptied. They saw me as expendable, a means to an end. And suddenly, all the pieces clicked. The way they ignored me, the way they pushed me out, the way they never once looked back. It wasn't just neglect, it was exploitation. I was done. I'd spent years clawing my way out of the pit they shoved me into, working 2, 3 jobs at a time, living off day-old bread, sleeping on concrete floors. And all that time, the money meant to help me start a life had already been spent on theirs. I felt stupid. For not asking questions. For assuming they were just lucky with money. For still hoping, even after everything, that maybe deep down, they loved me. That moment, sitting there with undeniable proof in my hands, that was the turning point. They weren't going to take anything else from me. Not my house. Not my peace. Not anymore. Jessica looked at me over her glasses and said, "We have a case. A strong one. Fraud, conversion, breach of fiduciary duty. It won't be quick, but we can win." And I was ready. Because this wasn't just about money. It was about reclaiming my voice. My power. My story. When the court papers were served, I could almost hear the shockwave from here. My phone exploded, voicemails from Jessica, Walter, Emily, all of them suddenly eager to talk. Yeah, now they wanted to talk. Now that they were looking down the barrel of consequences. I didn't answer. Didn't reply. I was done playing the game. The next few months were intense, legal meetings, depositions, court appearances. They tried everything. Claimed I was lying. Said I'd misunderstood the trust. Accused me of being bitter, of trying to punish the family. But we had the receipts. Literally. Every time they tried to spin a lie, Jessica countered with documentation. When they cried to the judge, she handed him hard facts. Ledger entries. Trust records. Proof of unauthorized withdrawals. It was brutal to sit through, to watch them squirm, lie, rewrite history. But for the first time in my life, I was the one with the truth. I wasn't that scared, discarded teenager anymore. I was standing tall, fighting back. When the verdict came, it felt like something inside me cracked open, and light came pouring through. The judge ruled in my favor. They were ordered to pay back every cent plus damages. And the look on their faces when the gavel dropped? Priceless. They couldn't guilt-trip their way out. Couldn't charm or intimidate or rewrite the past. They were exposed. And I was finally free. Walking out of the Bell County Justice Center that day, I felt like I could breathe for the first time in years. This wasn't about revenge. It was about truth. About finally knowing I wasn't the crazy one. That everything I remembered, the cold, the silence, the pain, it had all happened. And it mattered. Since then, they've tried reaching out. Letters. Emails. All carefully worded. "We're sorry. We just want to talk. We want to make things right. But I know better now. You don't show up with apologies after you've set someone's life on fire. You don't get to play the victims when the only reason you're sorry is because you lost." I blocked their numbers. Tossed the letters. They're not a part of my story anymore. No? Now I wake up in the home I built. I make coffee in my tiny kitchen, sit on my thrift store couch, and look around at a space that's mine. Earned. Sacred. I've got a job I love. I've got security. I've got peace. And more valuable than any paycheck or settlement. I've got clarity. It took years. It took pain. It took hell. But I made it through. And in the process, I finally learned something that no one ever taught me growing up. Family isn't blood. It's respect. It's showing up. It's the people who see you, really see you, and stand by you when it counts. Walter, the old baker who gave me a shot when I had nothing, he showed me more love than my own father ever did. He didn't give me charity. He gave me a chance. A space. A future. He gave me hope. I don't know exactly what comes next. I'm still healing. Still working on the trust thing. Still learning how to believe I deserve happiness. But I know this. I'm not invisible anymore. I'm not a victim. I'm Logan, a man who survived, who stood his ground, who took back his life, and won.